All right, so Adobe Premiere Pro. Let's get started by opening the program. Adobe Premiere. Okay, so with Adobe Premiere, the greatest thing about it is that it integrates with a bunch of different pieces of software, but that's a little bit more advanced to start talking about After Effects and Audition and all those types of things. So we're just going to start talking about the layout of it first in this video. If you've used Premiere before, you'll see a handful of your most recent files here, but let's just go ahead and start a new project. When you're starting a new project, it's gonna throw some options in your face, and most of these you can ignore, but let's go through them quickly. You choose what you want to name your project, so let's just call this DIY Video Guy Test Project. Choose where you want to put it. It'll default to put it into the Premiere Pro folder, but if you're working to an external hard drive, or you want to put it on your desktop, or wherever you want to put it, this is where you choose that location. Then the next thing is your renderer. This is pretty basic because you want to stick to hardware rendering if possible instead of software rendering. Next up, display format. I always go time code because I don't really use feet or frames. I'm not using film, I'm using digital. Next up, I use audio samples for the audio display. Capture, I do DV instead of HDV, and you go ahead and click OK. Now, Adobe Premiere will open up, and sometimes you'll get hit with this audio dialog if your audio hardware is different. So if you're running into a mixer or a set of speakers or something, this may pop up to let you know that's changed since the last time you used Premiere. Let's go ahead and say no for now, and let's walk through the different panels in Premiere Pro. So when it opens, this is kind of the default setup you'll see. But you just have to know that there are a bunch of different workspaces, and this is kind of one I've customized. So let's go ahead and go to the editing workspace. This is the primary one you'll be in for a while, so this is probably the best one to get to know. Up here you have your source section. This will pull up any clips you have that you want to look at that aren't necessarily down in this timeline. And when you're looking at your timeline, it'll show up over in this program section. So the best way to show you this is to actually import some footage. So let's go ahead and down here in the project window, I'm going to go ahead and double click to import some media and go ahead and take something from a movies folder that I just recorded recently, grab some video files there, and go ahead, hit enter, and import those files. So now that I have these files, you can see that if I double click and I am looking at this now in the source monitor, which means I haven't added it to a timeline, I haven't started editing at all, I'm just looking at what this source file looks like. I can do the same thing with this ScreenFlow recording here, so you can see that I recorded my screen at the same time, and I can look at the source files for that. Now, if you're going to actually have these things in the timeline, let's go ahead and drag both of these down and make a new timeline. You can see that now when I'm scrubbing through, it's actually showing up over here in the program monitor. So source monitor is what you're using to look at footage that you're not editing currently, and the program monitor is what you're looking at while you're editing. So those are the basic things. Now, hidden between all of these are other tabs for other panels. You have effects controls where when you select a clip, like a video clip, you get a bunch of different options for different effects you want to do. I can scale it, I can make it bigger or smaller, and there are a bunch of different things you can do, and this gets more advanced as you add more effects from the effects panel that you can bring in to blur your video or key out green screen or add transitions and all that kind of stuff. But just know that this effect control panel is pretty important, and you're going to be jumping in there a lot to make little changes to your video and your audio that's down in your timeline. Next up, there's an audio clip mixer where when you're playing back audio, you can actually see the tracks and you can make adjustments like you would on a mixer board, but within the software. And then metadata is something I rarely ever use. I don't really care about the metadata on my stuff too much. So let's open up the source menu again and go back down to project here. Down here you have different ways to view things, and you can make bins, which are like folders. So I could say video, and then I could make one for audio, and I could make one for graphics. And that would be a way to organize your files. So then you can take your video and put it there. Maybe you have one for sequences, which is what they call the thing we made down in the timeline. So this thing down here is a sequence. You can start to organize your files a little bit by making bins down in this project folder. You can also go to Media Browser, and this actually goes to your computer. Whatever hard drives you have plugged in, the hard drive in your computer, that's how you browse around to bring in footage that way. Or like I did when you're in this project section, you can double click or do a shortcut like Command I or Control I on Windows, and you can import footage that way. Next, you have info. So if you're wondering what frame rate a clip is at, or how long it is, or the sample rate on the audio, any of that stuff can be found in the info. Effects, I showed briefly earlier, where you have a bunch of effects for video and audio, as well as transitions for video and audio. You can also make your own presets. You can organize these as much as you want. So if you keep using the same effect on a video, make a preset and save it here. Next, you have markers. And as you're going through an editing, if you hit M, you can add a marker at any point. See, I have the audio selected here, so the audio is getting a marker. If I don't have anything selected, it'll put a marker on the whole sequence. And then you can go through each of the markers. Let's say you have 3 here. You can select them. You can make notes here. You can make notes on this one and this one. Or you can double click them, and you can bring up the notes and change the color, change the duration, and you can see there now I can see the text on the marker. And so there's a lot of different things you can do with markers, but this is the tab to get through all of them. Now you can rearrange pretty much anything as you see fit in this workspace, to whatever view you want, to multiple monitors, anything like that. And how you do that is just by grabbing one. So you can see they have this little hamburger menu here where you can close, undock, and make it go away. But if you do undock, then it's floating and it's by itself, which you may want, you may not want. But if you grab where the name of it is, you can see as I hover and move around here, I can put it different places. So the big middle section means it'll actually go in with all those other tabs there. If you do above, it'll snap in above. If you do to the right or left, it'll snap to the side like it was before. You can pretty much play around with how you want it to fit in. And then once you've got this all set up how you want it, you can go to Window, Workspace, Save as New Workspace, and you can see it comes with some defaults. I have some of my own, but the ones they have built in are pretty good. So if you're doing an audio workflow, it's probably good to have your audio clip mixers, maybe your audio track mixers up. If you're doing assembly, this is really helpful because you have a large panel for all your media in your project window, and then you have your timeline and your program and source monitors. If you're doing color, this is one of their newer ones in 2015, and it pulls up the scopes, the color panel on the side. So I can go ahead and let's get to my other clip of me actually on screen here. And I can add a LUT, I can change the exposure, I can add more contrast, raise the highlights, lower the shadows, make it look awful, or do auto, or reset it. And you can do a lot of things with curves and vignettes, and you can do a bunch of stuff in this color panel. So you can see there's different workspaces for different tasks that you would do. Assembly would be putting the video together the first time. Color would be making it look really good. Audio, editing it, all that kind of stuff. So you might want to mess around with different workspaces. Now, last couple things I want to talk about is, and let me reset this to their basic editing layout here. But the last couple things I want to talk about are your audio meters, which are over here. So I go ahead and play this back. You can see I have a left channel and a right channel, and these are just showing where they're hitting volume-wise. And if you scroll on these different tracks, they start to expand, and you can see this top section has a left label and the bottom is a right label. And so I can see as I'm playing back that the right channel is a little bit louder. The last thing I want to talk about is all of your tools. So to click through different things, you're going to be on the selection tool most of the time. But there are plenty of other tools to do different things, mainly down in this section here. So zoom is helpful because you can click on a section and then it'll zoom in right on that. Your razor tool is what you're going to use to cut different pieces of clips, and then go back to your selection tool, select, and then you can delete that. So play around with these different tools and see what they do. The main ones are going to be your razor tool, your selection tool, and maybe you'll use your slip tool or one of your ripple edits or rolling edit tools. Those are the main ones that I use. So, I mean, that's an overview of the software as a whole. There are tons of preferences and all that kind of stuff. And next, we're just going to get into properly importing and editing and color correcting and exporting, all that kind of stuff that you would do in any video program. But I think it's important to get an overview of all the different panels and things you can do. And I didn't even go over ones that are hidden. If you go to Window, there are other panels and stuff you can bring in to make titles and to see your history, to see the last thing you did and be able to undo it. So there are a lot of different ways you can customize Premiere Pro, which is great, but it is just a little daunting when you're starting. So just start with one of their basic workspaces, maybe assembly, and then move to editing, and then move to color, and just stick with those for a while until you really feel like, oh, I'm gonna start to customize this to exactly how I want it. So that wraps up this first video on Adobe Premiere Pro. A little long-winded, but there's a lot going on in this software, and I wanted to give a little bit of an overview on it. So I'll see you in one of the future videos where I'll be talking about actually importing your video and audio footage, and then we'll work through syncing it and doing some color correcting on it. So I'll see you in that one.